Hello all, this is my video response to Andrew Cutter's um, top 10 favorite artists. As he had mentioned, he and I had did a podcast along with a couple of other gentlemen about pro wrestling, but before the recording process took place, we discussed what we did and didn't like in various comics and whatnot. And as a result of that, I kind of thought I'd go ahead and put together my top 10 all-time favorite artists. Of course, these things are always subject to change, give or take. But as it stands right now, jumping in feet first. My number 10 artist is Michael Golden. I remember Michael Golden most strongly from his run on the Micronauts and the Nam. And while I've found his anatomy to be very stylized, almost to the point of seeming a bit wonky. Everything else, facial structures, the way he gets characters to emote, um, scenes that he established them in with various backgrounds that are um, relatively realistic. The guy is just a phenom, and as you can see before you right now, this is probably my favorite piece that he's done, and it's my favorite She-Hulk piece uh, altogether. And I could go on talking about Michael Golden for I don't know for how long. I already have 2 books dealing with the guy's art. So let me jump on to number 9. And number 9 is Terry Dodson. Uh, I've enjoyed his work most on things like Wonder Woman. Uh, he's probably my favorite Wonder Woman artist in terms of uh, doing the character in an ongoing way. No disrespect to George Perez or Phil Jimenez, but Terry Dodson, I think he puts in enough sensuality to the character that I can't help but to like his style on her as well as other books. Um, my number 8 is Sandy Plunkett, someone who doesn't have a lot of notoriety to him, but I first became aware of Sandy Plunkett as a result of Marvel Fanfare number 6 with Spider-Man and Scarlet Witch. Now this cover that you see before you, that's not Sandy Plunkett's artwork. That's Craig Russell. But the work that Sandy Plunkett did on the interiors was basically just phenomenal. And I've seen subsequent work of his on things like Epic Comics, uh, DC's Who's Who, I think Marvel's Who's Who universe, and so on and so forth. And Sandy Plunkett probably reminds me the most of Jim Starlin, except that with Sandy Plunkett doesn't draw people as bulky as Jim, and I think he has a better command of anatomical proportions and whatnot. So Sandy's my number 8, excuse me. My number 7 is Adam Hughes, and Adam Hughes is kind of a tough one because he does mostly cover work now. But beyond that, he kind of, how do I want to put this? He kind of floats in between, or he kind of straddles the fence between drawing and painting. I know a lot of his stuff is essentially either done with Copic markers and or is photoshopped in a good way. But basically, I just love how he draws in general. Um, And if there's anybody's Wonder Woman that I do like more than Terry Dodson, it would probably be Adam Hughes. So yeah, he's my number 7. My number 6 is the late great Gene Colan. Gene Colan was basically drawing at a time when I first got into comics, and seeing his take on Daredevil and Tomb of Dracula, he just had a way of making everything look cinematic It didn't look like a comic book. It looked like a almost a still frame movie on pages. So Gene Colan, of course, now is my number 6. My number 5 is Arthur Adams. Art Adams, I found out through his 6-issue mini Long Shot, and he's one of the few artists that I think had pretty much all the goods when he came into the industry. There's very few people that I think come into the industry, in the comic industry, and bring their A game. Art Adams, I think, is one of them. And on top of which, he's improved over the years as well. So Art Adams is my number 5. My number 4, another guy that I think doesn't get enough recognition, and that's Brian Stelfreeze. I first found out about Brian Stelfreeze through a book, I believe, produced by people that had their own interview book called Comics Interview, and Cyclops was the name of his ongoing comic for, like, I think it was 3 issues. And even though he was very green, he was one of those guys you could see was going to develop into something significant. And having seen his work on Marvel characters, DC characters, Image, Top Cow, so on and so forth, the guy has never failed to amaze me. So big props to Brian Stelfreeze. Which brings me to my number 3, Kevin Nolan. Now, for the record, I don't like what Kevin Nolan's doing on the Infernal Man thing. But as far as his body of work goes, I remember his work starting out on Moon Knight, taking over for Bill Sienkiewicz, and how much I like his work so much more than Bill Sienkiewicz isn't even funny. He's done quite a bit of stuff for DC and Marvel as well. His work on his work for any company is usually pretty much exemplary, and his style to me is not really like anybody else's style. If there's anyone that seems like him, the only artist I would compare him to at this point, because I think this artist is influenced by Kevin Nolan, is Yannick Paquette. And Yannick Paquette couldn't have a better model to emulate than Kevin Nolan, in my opinion. And at my number 2, another artist that's passed on, the great Dave Stevens. His work in, I don't know if it was Star Slayer, Warlord, one of those comics where the Rocketeer was a backup comic. I bought the comic that was the Star Slayer, or whatever the name of it was. I'll put that somewhere in the annotations, I guess. I bought it strictly for the backup story because I think that Dave Stevens, short of maybe Frank Frazetta, does the best quote unquote good girl type art that I've ever seen. And that brings me to my number 1, which is Bernie Wrightson. And Bernie Wrightson, of course, I found out first through Swamp Thing. And in my opinion, still, he does the best Swamp Thing. His work on the Frankenstein graphic novel was, to me, beyond the pale. How great that book was. Just single page illustrations followed by a page or 2 of text. And I can't speak highly enough about him. His work in Creepy magazine, Eerie magazine, all the way up to the stuff he's doing now. Bernie Wrightson, to me, is just the almost near perfection as far as artists go. Anyway, that makes up my top 10. Love to hear from anybody else who their top 10 is. And until next time, night out.